It's been a long time since we've covered rFactor 2 on this channel. One of the main reasons for that is while rFactor 2 fumbled to find its direction over the last 2 years, it largely got surpassed by many of its contemporaries. One area, however, that rFactor 2 has remained unbeaten in ever since Studio 397 took the reins back in 2016 is track design. No other developer has the same meticulous level of attention to surface meshes, something we're often reminded of as we wait 15 minutes for a track to load. But you know what? I absolutely love that and always have. That borderline autistic fixation on detail over pragmatism is part of what I used to love about rFactor 2, before the scales began to swing way too far in the impractical direction. Well, it just so happens that Studio 397 have released 3 new top-tier tracks for their rFactor 2 platform, which we'll be going over later in the video. The original plan was to get access to these leading to release, but after relying on the managerial coherence of 397 and missing first the influencer release window and then the public release window, all without access to the content, I decided to take it back to the drawing board and do this as originally planned, in our signature narrative style. So sit back, crack open a cold one, and prepare to be serenaded by an epic of the ages, a tale of how a little-known developer in the Netherlands began gracing the international sim racing scene with the best quality renditions of classic tracks that it had ever seen. I'm going to run you through a quick history of Studio 397's portfolio of industry-leading tracks, beginning with Sebring, then covering a wealth of remarkable content, including the world-famous Nürburgring, while showing how at every point Studio 397 managed to over-deliver on the top standards of the sim racing industry. Then, we'll be going over the 3 newest tracks that have just been released, so make sure to hang around. Speaking of over-delivering, if you agree that we regularly over-deliver on awesome, educational, but also fun sim racing content on this channel, all while being extremely humble, consider poking that subscribe button to help us out. We're ever so close to cracking that 100k subscriber mark, so please, let me prove to my friends that I didn't waste the last 2 years making videos about driving fake cars for nothing. rFactor 2's version of Sebring was released in 2018 and began Studio 397's sprint to populate the sim with not only higher quality track content than was previously available in it, but also in sim racing as a whole. In 2018, we simply had never seen a track in any racing game with such a high quality mesh before. This was obvious to me even as a greenhorn, as it was footage of rFactor 2's then new GT3 cars battling around this dilapidated old airfield's pothole encrusted tarmac that made me fall in love with the sim for the first time. It was a perfect showcase of rFactor 2's then industry-leading tire model, showcasing all the flex and contortion of GT cars battling it out under load. I'd simply never seen a simulated race look so realistic before then. However, their biggest test was yet upon them. Long teased by 2019, Studio 397 finally unveiled their biggest track model yet, the largest racetrack in the world, the Nürburgring. To say that this track release completely changed my sim racing experience would be an understatement. I have hundreds of hours in rFactor 2 just due to this track alone. To this day, it is the most accurate version of the massive track, sans the repaved sections done to the real track in 2019. The laser scan that they used was the most accurate up until that point, and despite minor additions made to other Sims models, still remains the overall top rendering of the Nürburgring in sim racing. After establishing their reputation as top-tier track modelers, they snuck one under our radars, modeling the legendary Monaco F1 road circuit, but due to not being able to secure the licensing rights, had to call it Circuit d'Azur. Loading up the classic 1998 McLaren F1 car and running laps around the circuit while trying to squeeze an extra tenth out of each corner without becoming yet another indentation on the trackside barriers was a true test of personal skill, and this track became a favorite of hot lappers everywhere. 397 would then aim to take the crown for endurance sim racing by modeling one of the most revered tracks in the world, Circuit de la Sarthe, also known as the 24 Hours of Le Mans. In true form, they released a brutally detailed track model, leading the way to rFactor 2 hosting the most viewed sim racing event in history. While it may not have been exactly the 81 million views their parent company boasted, it was still rather impressive. The release of the Reza track pack was a rather forgettable affair, with the track quality substantially lower than the bar that 397 had set. While it was nice to be able to race tracks such as Imola and Virginia International in rFactor 2 for the first time, it ultimately fell short of the standard that 397 had set for their players. Aiming to cement their domination of sim endurance racing, 397 then released one of the most beloved racetracks of all time in late 2020, Spa-Francorchamps. Many of us by this point had already been driving a borrowed version of Spa from another major sim in rFactor 2, but it was of course great to get an official version with the mesh matching the insane quality standards set by 397. After securing the official Formula E license, 397 went on to do several high-quality models of various Formula E tracks, such as Rome, Monaco, New York, and Berlin, among others. More recently, they've released an industry-leading rendering of the legendary Monza, one of the oldest racetracks on Earth, followed by Daytona, the United States' most famous track, and no doubt one of the best endurance and oval racing circuits in the world. And that brings us to the modern day. Not content to simply release one or even two tracks, 397 have swung out of the gate with their Q2 content drop packing Donington Park, Brands Hatch, and Laguna Seca. I can't speak for you, but all three of these are some of my absolute favourite tracks in motorsport. Being packed as part of rFactor 2's new British Touring Car Championship content, Donington Park and Brands Hatch are a must-have for this type of racing. Donington Park is an F1 caliber circuit that unfortunately has fallen into disfavor compared to its more popular contemporary, Silverstone International. All the same, it hosts some amazing GT and club racing throughout the year and is definitely a fan favorite. My personal favorite part of the track is the descent down the Craner curves into the old hairpin. McLean's also tends to be a wonderful corner to test the physics model of any given sim, as it requires commitment over a blind crest, all the while the camber changes and pushes the car out wide. This often causes the car to snap oversteer and can showcase how well implemented a sim's aero and tyre models are. The S's, meanwhile, are extremely bumpy and require some serious commitment to sending it, which can be a great testing ground for how a sim handles bottoming out calculations, as well as its suspension, damper, and bump stop behaviours. Brands Hatch, meanwhile, is one of the most beloved little road-esque circuits in the world, an absolute must-have for touring car racing. While the new touring cars are a world away from 90s DTM, a track like Brands Hatch certainly helps spice up the sterility of front-wheel drive hybrid powertrains. The Paddock Hill Bend is one of my favourite corners in all of motorsport. Almost like Radeon in reverse. You have to commit over a blind crest and then trust that the car is going to hook up as it understeers wildly down the hill once it hits the compression at the very bottom. The awesome send it and see commitment required over Hawthorne Bend, Westfield Bend, and Dingledale Corner makes Brands Hatch one of the most exciting circuits to race. Unfortunately, this same exciting layout tends to make it a very tricky course to overtake on, often leading to long trains forming during races, relying on mistakes being made by leaders rather than creating opportunities for trailing cars. That aside, any race on Brands Hatch is always a fun one for me, and given the relative shortness of the circuit, as well as its collection of varying corners, can make it a really good testing ground for car setups too. Laguna Seca takes us across the pond, back to the western coast of the United States. Laguna Seca is a track built in the middle of a desert, commonly known for the intense IMSA multi-class races it hosts, as well as the IndyCar Championship. Much like Brands Hatch, it's one of my favorites to fire up and go. With a GT3 lap time somewhere around the low 120s, it's a tight little track with lots of variable corner types crammed into a value package. All of this is built around its crown jewel, and one of the most popular corners in motorsport, the corkscrew. A surefire test of the physics engine of any sim. All three of these tracks already existed in, let's call them modded form in rFactor 2, but the official Studio 397 versions are a clear cut above, as they always are. Not simply better than the track models that the mods are borrowed from, these new versions once again set the benchmark in sim racing track quality. So let's run over all the top tier, meticulously laser scanned tracks currently on offer in rFactor 2. We began with Sebring, leading to the outrageously large Nürburgring, followed by Circuit de la Sarthe and Circuit d'Azur. Wink wink, Monaco wink. This was then followed up by the beloved Spa and a collection of Formula E tracks that I clearly don't care about enough to name individually. We then got the legendary Monza, followed by Daytona, and now Donington Park, Brands Hatch, and Laguna Seca. Assuming that rFactor 2 actually had the player base, that would be a pretty good track roster to have on rotation for competitions. Now, I don't want anybody to misinterpret the point of this video. We're here to celebrate excellence in sim racing by giving some very talented people their due. The folks who model tracks for Studio 397 do an absolute top tier job, among the very elite of sim racing. However, I'm not using this as an opportunity to tell you that you should suddenly run out and buy rFactor 2 and plonk down hundreds of dollars on their DLCs. If you like doing anything other than hot lapping, you'll likely find the experience somewhat hollow. rFactor 2 is still plagued by many issues, too many to even begin listing here, not least of which is the very strange situation that their parent company are currently embroiled in. So don't simply go out and buy all of this, then come back here and say, Ermin, you lied to me. You said rFactor 2 was amazing and I wasted all this money and now there's nobody to race against. I'm simply giving due to some very talented creators who are doing a great job. I wish that rFactor 2 was still my favorite sim, and I wish that there were enough of a community or interest level to build content around. But the reality is that there simply isn't. If you have a lot of disposable cash and want to test drive the best rendered tracks in all of sim racing, very likely by yourself in practice sessions or against some extremely wonky AI, then this might be worth a consideration. For the rest of us, we can just appreciate the small slice of excellence from afar and hope that with continued building and refinement, that rFactor 2 eventually finds its way back to the front ranks of sim racing again. Make sure to subscribe for more somber, reflective sim racing content, and until the next one, I'll see you all later.